The wagon wheels kicked up dust that hung in the September air like a veil between Catherine Moore and the life she was leaving behind. And as the town of Redemption Valley came into view through the shimmer of late afternoon heat, she had no idea that the cowboy waiting there would change everything she thought she knew about home. Catherine had been traveling for 3 weeks straight, her modest covered wagon packed with carefully labeled jars, bottles, and dried bundles of herbs that represented 5 years of study under old Dr. Whitmore in Philadelphia. It was 1878, and the West was still wild enough to need everything she had to offer. She had left Pennsylvania with a broken engagement and a determination to build something of her own, something that could not be taken away by the whims of men who saw women as ornaments rather than equals. Her former fiancé had laughed when she told him about her studies, about the powders and tinctures that could ease pain and fight infection. He wanted a wife who would host dinner parties, not one who smelled of lavender and chamomile. The town of Redemption Valley sat in a pocket of New Mexico territory, surrounded by red rock formations that glowed like embers in the setting sun. Catherine could see perhaps 20 buildings lining a main street, with scattered homesteads dotting the valley floor beyond. Smoke rose from a few chimneys, thin and hesitant, as if even the fires were struggling in this place. She guided her horse, a sturdy mare named Prudence, down the slope toward the town. The wagon creaked and rattled over the uneven ground, and Catherine felt every jolt in her spine. She was 24 years old, unmarried, and entirely alone in a territory where women like her were rarities. The sensible thing would have been to stay in Philadelphia, to accept Henry's proposal despite his condescension, to live a comfortable if constrained life. But Catherine had never been particularly sensible. As she reached the outskirts of town, she noticed something odd. The few people visible on the street moved slowly, as if wading through water. A woman sat on a porch, her face pale and drawn. 2 children huddled in the shade of a building, their movements lethargic. Catherine's trained eye recognized the signs immediately. This town was sick. She pulled Prudence to a stop near what appeared to be a general store. Before she could climb down from the wagon seat, a man emerged from the building across the street. He was tall, with broad shoulders and sun-darkened skin, wearing dusty chaps and a hat that had seen better days. He moved with the easy grace of someone comfortable in his own body, but Catherine noticed the tightness around his eyes, the way his jaw was set with worry. "You lost, miss," he called out, his voice carrying a hint of Texas in its drawl. Catherine straightened her spine and met his gaze directly. "Not lost. I am here to conduct business. I sell herbal remedies, medicinal preparations for common ailments." The cowboy walked closer, and Catherine could see him more clearly now. He was perhaps 27 or 28, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of creek water, somewhere between blue and green. There was a scar on his left cheek, a thin white line that might have come from a knife or barbed wire. He was not handsome in the conventional sense, but there was something compelling about his face, an openness mixed with strength. "Herbal remedies," he repeated, and something shifted in his expression. Hope, maybe, or desperation. "Can you cure fever, weakness, stomach troubles?" "I can certainly treat those symptoms," Catherine said carefully, "though I would need to examine patients to determine the underlying cause." The cowboy removed his hat, revealing hair plastered to his forehead with sweat despite the cooling evening air. "My name is Jesse Thornton. I run the cattle operation about 5 miles north of here. This town, miss, it is dying. We have had 3 people pass in the last month, and there are at least a dozen more who are ailing. The nearest doctor is in Santa Fe, and that is a 3-day ride. We sent for him 2 weeks ago, but he never came. Catherine climbed down from the wagon, her legs stiff from the long day of travel. She was not a tall woman, and Jesse Thornton towered over her by nearly a foot, but she had learned long ago not to let physical stature determine her authority. "What are the symptoms? Be specific." Jesse's eyes widened slightly at her commanding tone, but he answered readily. "Starts with tiredness, then comes the fever. Some folks get terrible stomach pains, cannot keep food down. The fever breaks after a few days, but they are left weak as kittens. Mrs. Patterson over at the boarding house. She has been sick for near 3 weeks now. Cannot get out of bed." Catherine's mind was already sifting through possibilities. "Has anyone noticed problems with the water? Any unusual taste or smell?" "Now that you mention it, the creek water has been tasting off. Some folks thought maybe something died upstream, but we never found anything." "Show me where you draw your water," Catherine said, "and then take me to Mrs. Patterson." Jesse hesitated, his hat turning in his hands. "Miss, I do not mean to be forward, but if you can help these people, if you can figure out what is making them sick, we would be mighty grateful. More than grateful. We could pay you, of course, but it is more than that. This valley needs someone with your skills. We need someone to stay." Catherine felt something catch in her chest at the raw honesty in his voice. This was not the artificial courtesy she had known in Philadelphia, the social niceties that meant nothing. This was a man asking for help because his community was suffering, and he was willing to set aside whatever pride might have kept him from asking a stranger, a woman no less, for assistance. "Let us see what the problem is first," she said, keeping her voice brisk and professional. "Then we can discuss the future." Jesse led her to the creek that ran along the eastern edge of town. The water looked clear enough in the fading light, but when Catherine knelt and cupped some in her palm, she noticed a faint mineral smell. She pulled a small glass vial from her pocket and collected a sample. "There is a mining operation about 10 miles upstream," Jesse said, watching her work. "They have been digging for silver since spring." "And when did people start getting sick?" "Early summer, I would say. June, maybe." Catherine corked the vial and tucked it into her bag. Mining operations can contaminate water sources with various minerals and chemicals. If they are using mercury to process the silver ore, that could cause these symptoms. "So, what do we do?" Jesse asked, and Catherine heard the weight of responsibility in his question. This was a man who felt personally accountable for his neighbor's well-being. "First, stop drinking from the creek. Use only well water until I can test the source. Second, take me to the sick so I can assess their condition and provide treatment. Third, someone needs to ride to that mine and find out what they are dumping into the water." Jesse nodded slowly. "I can do that last part myself, but Miss and I apologize for not asking sooner. What is your name?" "Catherine Moore." "Miss Moore, it is nearly dark. Let me help you get settled at the boarding house. Despite Mrs. Patterson being ill, her daughter is running things. Then tomorrow, after you have had a chance to rest, I will take you to see the sick folks. The mine can wait one more day." Catherine wanted to argue, wanted to insist on seeing patients immediately, but fatigue was pulling at her bones. 3 weeks on the trail had worn her down more than she cared to admit. "Very well, but I rise early." "So do I," Jesse said, and something in his slight smile made Catherine's heart do an unexpected flutter. The boarding house was a 2-story structure with peeling white paint and a sagging porch. Jesse carried Catherine's bags inside while she secured her wagon and tended to Prudence. The horse had been her constant companion since Independence, Missouri, and Catherine found herself talking to the animal as she brushed her down. "He seems kind," she murmured, running the brush along Prudence's flank. "But we are not here to notice kind cowboys. We are here to build our practice, to prove we can do this on our own." Prudence whickered softly. and Catherine chose to interpret that as agreement. Inside the boarding house, she met Mary Patterson, a young woman of perhaps 20 with her mother's blonde hair and tired eyes. "Papa died 2 years back," Mary explained as she showed Catherine to a small but clean room on the second floor. "Mama and I have been running this place together, but with her being sick, it has all fallen on me. Mr. Thornton says you might be able to help." "I will do everything I can," Catherine promised. "In the morning, I would like to examine your mother if she is willing." "She will be willing," Mary said fervently. "She will do anything to get back on her feet. We cannot afford for her to be down much longer." That night, Catherine lay in an unfamiliar bed and listened to the sounds of the frontier town settling into darkness. Somewhere, a dog barked. The wind rattled the window frame. And despite her exhaustion, she found her thoughts returning to Jesse Thornton and the way he had looked at her when he asked her to stay. Like she might be the answer to a prayer he had been too practical to voice. She pushed the thought away and focused instead on what she knew about mercury poisoning, about mineral contamination, about the treatments she could offer. This was why she had come west, to use her skills, to help people who had no other options. The fact that one of those people happened to have creek-colored eyes was entirely irrelevant. Catherine woke before dawn to the sound of a rooster announcing the new day. She dressed quickly in a practical calico dress, pinned her dark hair into a severe bun, and made her way downstairs with her medical bag. Mary was already in the kitchen, stoking the fire in the massive iron stove. "I thought I was the only early riser in this house," Catherine said, causing the younger woman to jump. Mary laughed, a hand pressed to her chest. "Lord, you startled me. Yes, the bread does not bake itself, and we have 3 guests besides yourself. Nothing fancy, but I do my best to send folks off with a full stomach. May I see your mother before breakfast?" Mary's smile faded. "Of course. She is in the back room, ground floor. We moved her down when the stairs got to be too much." Catherine found Mrs. Patterson propped up on pillows, her face the color of old parchment. She was a woman who had probably been robust once, but illness had whittled her down to angles and shadows. Her eyes, however, were sharp and alert. "You are the herb woman Jesse mentioned," she said without preamble. "Mary says you think it is the water making us sick." "I believe the water may be contaminated, yes," Catherine said, setting her bag on the bedside table. "With your permission, I would like to examine you." Mrs. Patterson waved a thin hand. "Do what you need to do." Catherine checked the woman's pulse, which was weak and irregular. She examined her eyes, her tongue, listened to her breathing. The symptoms were consistent with chronic low-level poisoning, nothing immediately fatal but certainly debilitating. "I am going to prepare a tincture that will help your body eliminate toxins," Catherine explained as she worked. "It is made from milk thistle and dandelion root, both excellent for supporting liver function. You will also need to drink plenty of clean water, well water only, not from the creek. And I am going to give you something to settle your stomach and restore your strength." "You really think you can help me?" Mrs. Patterson asked, and Catherine heard the fear underneath the words. This was a woman who had already lost her husband, who had a daughter depending on her, who could not afford to be weak. "I do," Catherine said firmly, "but you must follow my instructions exactly. Can you do that?" "Yes, madam." Catherine spent the next hour preparing medicines from the supplies in her wagon. She made the tincture for Mrs. Patterson, a gentle ginger tea for nausea, and a restorative tonic with nettle and yellow dock. By the time she returned to the boarding house, the sun was fully up, and Jesse Thornton was sitting on the front porch, his hat on his knee. He stood when he saw her. "Miss Moore, I was hoping to catch you before you started your rounds. I thought I could take you to the other sick folks, introduce you around." Catherine noticed that he had cleaned up since yesterday. His shirt was pressed, his hair neatly combed. The realization that he had made an effort for her was both flattering and slightly alarming. "That would be helpful," she said, keeping her voice neutral. "Let me give these to Mrs. Patterson, and then I am ready." They spent the morning going from house to house. Catherine met the Reverend Hamilton, who was recovering from the fever but still weak. She examined the Tucker twins, 7-year-old boys who had been sick for a week. She treated old Mr. Chen, who ran the laundry and spoke limited English but understood perfectly when Catherine mimed her instructions for taking the medicine. Jesse stayed with her the entire time, carrying her bag, making introductions, translating when necessary. Catherine found herself appreciating not just his help but his presence. He had a way of putting people at ease, of making them feel cared for without being patronizing. He asked after children by name, remembered details about people's lives, offered quiet words of encouragement. "You are good with them," Catherine said as they walked from the Tucker home to the small house where the schoolteacher lived alone. Jesse shrugged. "I have known most of these folks for years. Redemption Valley is not much to look at, but it is home. These are my people." "You did not grow up here." "No, madam. I am from Texas originally, near Austin. Came out here 5 years ago looking for work, ended up buying some land and starting a small cattle operation. It is not a big spread, but it is mine." Catherine heard the pride in his voice and understood it completely. It was the same pride she felt when she looked at her wagon full of carefully prepared medicines, the same satisfaction that came from building something with your own hands and mind. The schoolteacher, Miss Sarah Jenkins, was perhaps the sickest person Catherine had seen yet. She was barely conscious, her fever raging. Catherine worked quickly, administering a fever-reducing tea made from willow bark and yarrow, bathing the woman's face and wrists with cool water. "She has been like this for 2 days," Jesse said quietly. "Her sister came by yesterday, begging me to ride for the doctor again, but I knew he would not come in time." "You did the right thing," Catherine said, focused on her patient. "Help me get her to sit up. She needs to drink." Together, they managed to get some of the tea into Miss Jenkins. Catherine left detailed instructions with the woman's sister, who had arrived wringing her hands and weeping with relief at having someone to help. By noon, Catherine had seen all of the town's sick residents. She was exhausted, and her mind was spinning with treatment plans and medication schedules. Jesse insisted on taking her to the small cafe for lunch. "You need to eat," he said when she started to protest. "Cannot have our healer collapsing from hunger." The cafe was run by a round Mexican woman named Senora Martinez, who took one look at Catherine and immediately began filling a plate with beans, rice, and freshly made tortillas. Jesse ordered the same, and they sat at a small table near the window. "You have done more for this town in one morning than anyone has managed in 2 months, Jesse said, his eyes serious. "I know you said you were just passing through selling your remedies, but Miss Moore, we need you here. Not just for now, not just until this crisis passes, but permanently." Catherine looked down at her plate, her appetite suddenly gone. "Mr. Thornton, I appreciate the sentiment, but I cannot make that kind of decision after 1 day. I have plans. I intended to travel to California to establish a practice in San Francisco." "California is not going anywhere," Jesse said. "But these people, they need help now. Miss Jenkins, if you had not been here today, I do not know if she would have survived another night. Mrs. Patterson, those boys, the Reverend, they are all getting treatment because you happened to ride in when you did. But what happens when you leave? What happens the next time someone gets sick?" Catherine felt the weight of his words, the truth in them. She had spent years studying specifically so she could help people who lacked access to proper medical care. Was it not hypocritical to claim that mission while also prioritizing her own comfort and ambitions? "Stay," Jesse said, and his voice had dropped to something softer, more personal. "Stay and heal this whole valley. Not just the people who are sick now, but everyone. Set up a real practice. Be the healer this place needs. I know I have no right to ask this of you, a stranger who just rode in yesterday, but I am asking anyway." Catherine met his eyes and saw the sincerity there, the hope, and she felt something shift inside her, a recognition she was not quite ready to name. "Let me think about it," she said finally. "Let me see how my patients respond to treatment. Let me investigate the water situation. Then I will decide." Jesse nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "That is all I can ask for. Now eat. Senora Martinez will be offended if you do not clean your plate, and trust me, you do not want to offend Senora Martinez." As if summoned by her name, the proprietor appeared at their table with 2 cups of coffee. "You are the medicine woman, yes," she said to Catherine. "My nephew, he has terrible headaches. Can you help?" And just like that, Catherine had another patient. The afternoon was spent much like the morning, seeing people, diagnosing ailments, dispensing medicines and advice. Word had spread that there was a healer in town, and people came with complaints both urgent and chronic. Jesse stayed by her side, helping however he could, and Catherine found herself relying on his presence more than she wanted to admit. As the sun began to set, Jesse walked her back to the boarding house. The street was quiet, most people having retreated indoors for supper. "Tomorrow, I am riding out to the mine," Jesse said. "I need to see what they are dumping in that creek, get them to stop if possible. Would you want to come along?" Catherine was surprised by the question. "You want me there?" "I figure having someone who can explain the medical side of things might carry more weight than just a cowboy complaining about bad water. Besides, it is a pretty ride if you do not mind getting up early." Catherine thought about it for a moment, then nodded. "All right. What time?" "Dawn. We will be back by afternoon if we push it. I will be ready." Jesse tipped his hat to her, and Catherine noticed the way the dying light caught in his eyes, turning them almost golden. "Thank you, Miss Moore, for everything you have done today. This town is lucky you rode in when you did." Catherine watched him walk away, his long stride carrying him quickly down the street toward the livery stable where his horse was waiting. She stood on the porch for a long moment, thinking about San Francisco and the plans she had made, about the life she had imagined for herself. Then she thought about Mrs. Patterson's grateful tears, about the Tucker twins' mother hugging her, about Miss Jenkins fighting to survive. Inside, Mary had supper waiting and Catherine ate mechanically, her mind elsewhere. That night, she wrote in her journal by candlelight, trying to sort through the tangle of her thoughts. "I came west to be independent," she wrote. "To build something of my own, to prove that a woman can have a profession, can contribute meaningfully to society. But perhaps I have been thinking too narrowly about what that means. Perhaps building something does not necessarily mean going to the biggest city or the farthest destination. Perhaps it means finding a place that needs what you have to offer and choosing to stay." She paused, her pen hovering over the page. Then she added, "And perhaps it also means being open to unexpected possibilities, even if one of those possibilities is a cowboy with creek-colored eyes who asked me to stay before he even knew my name." Catherine woke in darkness to the sound of someone tapping gently on her door. "Miss Moore," it was Mary's voice. "Mr. Thornton is downstairs waiting on you." Catherine dressed quickly in her most practical riding outfit, a split skirt and sturdy blouse that scandalized proper society, but was infinitely more sensible for frontier life. She braided her hair in a single plait down her back and grabbed her hat before heading downstairs. Jesse was in the kitchen, accepting a bundle of food from Mary. He turned when Catherine entered, and she saw approval in his eyes as he took in her practical attire. "You have ridden before," he said. It was not a question. "I am from Pennsylvania, not the moon," Catherine replied with a hint of tartness. "I can ride perfectly well." Jesse's grin was quick and genuine. "Never thought otherwise. I brought a horse for you from my string, a good steady mare named Daisy. She will treat you right." They set out as the first gray light was touching the eastern horizon. The air was cool and fresh, and Catherine breathed it in deeply, feeling more awake and alive than she had in weeks. Jesse kept his horse to a walk until they were clear of town, then let it move into an easy trot. Daisy followed suit, and Catherine found the rhythm easily. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, following the creek upstream. The valley was beautiful in the early morning light, the red rocks glowing pink and gold, the sparse vegetation silvered with dew. Catherine spotted a rabbit darting into the brush, a hawk circling high overhead. "It is peaceful out here," she said, breaking the silence. "That it is," Jesse agreed. "This is my favorite time of day, before the heat sets in, before the work starts demanding attention. Just the land and the sky and the quiet." "Do you miss Texas?" Jesse considered the question. "Sometimes. I miss my family, my folks, and my 2 younger sisters. But they are settling in well there. My father has a good farm going. I send money when I can, visit when I am able. But this valley, this is where I belong now." "Does that make sense?" "It does," Catherine said, thinking about Philadelphia and the life she had left behind. "Sometimes home is not where you started. Sometimes it is where you choose to be." Jesse glanced at her, and something in his expression made her pulse quicken. "Exactly." They reached the mine around mid-morning. It was a rough operation, a series of tunnels cut into the hillside with equipment and debris scattered around the entrance. A dozen men were working, and they all stopped to stare as Jesse and Catherine rode up. A man who appeared to be the foreman came forward, wiping his hands on his pants. He was short and stocky, with a thick beard and suspicious eyes. "Help you folks." Jesse dismounted and helped Catherine down from Daisy. "We are from Redemption Valley, downstream from here. We have had a problem with people getting sick, and we think it might be related to contamination in the creek." "What are you dumping in the water?" The foreman's face closed down. "We are not dumping nothing illegal. We have every right to process our ore." "I am not questioning your rights," Jesse said calmly. "I am questioning your methods. Are you using mercury in your processing?" "Maybe we are, maybe we are not. That is our business." Catherine stepped forward. "Let me explain something to you. Mercury poisoning causes fever, weakness, neurological damage, and death. There are 3 people in Redemption Valley who have died in the last month, possibly from drinking contaminated water. If we can prove that your operation is responsible, you will be liable not just for damages but potentially for criminal charges." The foreman spat on the ground. "You cannot prove nothing." "Actually, I can," Catherine said coolly. "I have samples of the water. I can have them analyzed in Santa Fe. It would take time, but it can be done. Or you can cooperate now, show us your operation, and we can work together to find a solution that lets you continue mining while protecting the people downstream." The foreman looked between Catherine and Jesse, clearly trying to decide how serious they were. Finally, he jerked his head toward the mine. "Fine, come on." The tour was brief and informative. The mine was indeed using mercury to separate silver from ore, and they were dumping the waste products directly into a runoff ditch that fed into the creek. Catherine felt her anger rising as she looked at the careless operation, but she kept her voice level. "You need to stop dumping waste in the creek immediately," she said. "Build a containment pond, let the mercury settle out before releasing any water. It is not complicated and it will keep people from dying." "That costs money," the foreman protested. "So do lawsuits and criminal trials," Jesse said flatly. "And if one more person dies from this, I will personally make sure the territorial marshal knows exactly where the contamination came from." The foreman scowled but eventually nodded. All right, we will build the damn pond. But if it cuts into our production, I am sending the owners a bill for your interference." "You do that," Jesse said. As they rode back toward Redemption Valley, Catherine felt a fierce satisfaction. It was not a complete solution. The mercury already in the creek would take time to dissipate, but at least the source of new contamination would be stopped. "That was well done," Jesse said as they let the horses pick their way down a rocky stretch of trail. "The way you handled him, the facts about the poisoning, the offer of a reasonable solution. You have a gift for dealing with difficult people." "I grew up with 3 older brothers," Catherine said. "You learn early how to hold your ground," Jesse laughed. "I have 2 younger sisters, so I learned the opposite. Learned how to be patient and how to braid hair." The image of this strong, capable cowboy braiding a little girl's hair made Catherine smile. "You are full of surprises, Mr. Thornton. I could say the same about you, Miss Moore." They stopped to rest the horses and eat the lunch Mary had packed. They sat on a flat rock overlooking the valley, and Catherine found herself relaxing in a way she had not relaxed in months. Jesse was easy to be with, comfortable. He did not try to fill every silence with chatter, but when he spoke, his words were thoughtful and genuine. "Can I ask you something personal?" Jesse said as they packed up the remains of their lunch. Catherine felt a flutter of nervousness but nodded. "You can ask. I may not answer." "Why did you really come west? I do not doubt you are a healer, and a damn good one, but there is more to it than just wanting to help people. You could have done that in Pennsylvania." Catherine was quiet for a long moment, considering how much to reveal. Then she decided that Jesse had earned her honesty. "I was engaged to be married. He was a good man by most standards, wealthy, respected, handsome. But he did not see me as an equal. He saw me as an ornament, a pretty thing to display at parties. When I told him about my studies, about wanting to practice medicine, he laughed. He said it was a charming hobby but nothing serious. I realized that if I married him, I would spend the rest of my life being diminished, being made smaller to fit into the space he had allotted for me. So I ended the engagement and left." Jesse was quiet, absorbing this. Then he said, "He was a fool. Perhaps. But he was also a product of his society, his upbringing. The same society that told me my only value was in making a good match, in running a household, in being decorative and obedient." "You are about as far from decorative and obedient as a person can get," Jesse said with a slight smile. "And I mean that as a compliment." Catherine felt warmth spread through her chest. "It is taken as one." As they rode the final miles back to Redemption Valley, Catherine found herself thinking about Jesse's request that she stay. The idea was starting to feel less like an imposition and more like a possibility, maybe even an opportunity. She had skills this town needed, and they were willing to pay for them. She could build a real practice here, become an integral part of a community. And if that community happened to include a certain cowboy, well, that was simply an additional consideration. They reached town in the late afternoon, and Jesse insisted on walking Catherine to the boarding house despite his own work waiting. At the door, he paused, turning his hat in his hands in a gesture that was becoming familiar. "Thank you for coming with me today," he said. "I know it was not how you planned to spend your time, but I appreciated the company and the help." "It was necessary," Catherine said, "and I am glad we could address the problem at its source." Jesse hesitated, then said, "Miss Moore, Catherine, if I may be so bold, would you do me the honor of joining me for supper tomorrow evening? Not at the cafe, but at my ranch. I would like to show you my place, and my cook makes a much better meal than I can describe." Catherine's heart was suddenly beating faster. This was clearly not just a friendly meal between acquaintances. This was Jesse making his interest known, stepping beyond the professional and into the personal. "I would like that," she heard herself say. "What time?" The smile that spread across Jesse's face was like sunrise. "I will pick you up at 6 if that suits you." "It suits me fine." Catherine watched him walk away with a spring in his step, and she pressed a hand to her chest, feeling her heart racing. What was she doing? She had come west to be independent, to escape the complications of romantic entanglements. But Jesse did not feel like a complication. He felt like something else entirely, something she was not quite ready to name but could not bring herself to push away. The next day passed in a blur of patient visits and medicine preparation. Catherine was pleased to see that Mrs. Patterson was already showing improvement, sitting up in bed and managing to eat solid food. Miss Jenkins' fever had broken, and while she was still weak, the crisis had passed. The Tucker twins were running around causing mischief, which their mother assured Catherine was a sure sign of recovery. "You have worked a miracle," Mrs. Patterson said as Catherine checked her pulse. "I thought I was dying, truly. And now I feel like I might actually see another spring." "It was not a miracle," Catherine corrected gently. "It was medicine and your own body's strength, but I am glad you are improving. Continue with the tincture for another 2 weeks and make sure you are drinking plenty of clean water." As 6 o'clock approached, Catherine found herself unusually nervous. She changed her dress 3 times before settling on a simple blue cotton that brought out her eyes. She left her hair in its braid but wound it into a more elegant knot at the base of her neck. Mary noticed her preparations and smiled knowingly. "Mr. Thornton is a good man," the younger woman said. "He helped us so much when Papa died, made sure we had firewood for the winter, checked on us regular. He deserves someone special." Catherine was not sure what to say to that, so she simply nodded. Jesse arrived exactly at 6, driving a small buggy pulled by a handsome bay horse. He helped Catherine up, and she noticed that he had also made an effort with his appearance: clean shirt, freshly shaved, hair neatly combed. The ride to his ranch took about 20 minutes, following a well-maintained road that wound north out of the valley. Jesse pointed out landmarks as they went: the creek where he had first found gold as a foolish newcomer, the stand of cottonwoods where he liked to camp on hot summer nights, the distant mesa where wild horses sometimes gathered. The ranch itself was modest, but well kept. A sturdy house with a wide porch, a barn, several corrals, and various outbuildings. Catherine could see cattle grazing in the distance, and chickens scratching in a pen near the house. "It is not much compared to some of the big spreads around here," Jesse said, and Catherine heard a note of self-consciousness in his voice. "But it is all mine, no debt, no partners. I built most of it with my own hands." "It is lovely," Catherine said honestly. "You should be proud of what you have accomplished." Jesse's cook turned out to be an elderly man named Frank, who had been a trail cook for 20 years before his legs gave out. He had prepared a feast of roasted chicken, fresh vegetables, biscuits, and an apple pie that smelled like heaven. They ate at a small table on the porch, watching the sun set over the valley. The conversation flowed easily, moving from Jesse's experiences driving cattle to Catherine's studies in Philadelphia, from favorite books to childhood memories. Catherine found herself laughing more than she had in months, and she realized with a start that she was genuinely happy. After dinner, Jesse gave her a tour of the ranch. He showed her the barn where he kept his string of horses, introduced her to his milk cow Bessie, pointed out the garden where Frank grew vegetables. His pride in the place was evident, and Catherine understood it completely. This was a man who had built something from nothing, who had worked hard and sacrificed to create a life of his own choosing. "I know it is not fancy," Jesse said as they stood looking out over the darkening valley, "but it is mine, and it is honest work. I like knowing that at the end of the day, I have accomplished something real." "I understand that more than you might think," Catherine said. "It is why I became a healer. I wanted to do work that mattered, that made a tangible difference in people's lives. I wanted to build something that was mine." Jesse turned to face her, and in the twilight his eyes were very serious. "You could build that here, Catherine. This valley needs you, but more than that, it deserves you. These are good people, hardworking and honest. They would support you, value you, give you the respect you deserve. And well, I would count it an honor to be part of whatever you build here." Catherine's breath caught. This was as close to a declaration as made no difference. Jesse was not just asking her to stay for the sake of the town. He was asking her to stay for him, to give whatever was developing between them a chance to grow. "Jesse," she said softly, using his first name for the first time, "I have been thinking about your offer about staying in Redemption Valley, and the truth is, I am seriously considering it. But I need you to understand something. I will not give up my independence. I will not become someone's wife and let my work be reduced to a hobby. I need to practice medicine, to be a healer first and foremost." "I would never ask you to give that up," Jesse said immediately. "Catherine, I am not like your former fiancé. I do not want an ornament or a decoration. I want a partner, an equal. Someone who challenges me and inspires me and makes me want to be better. And from what I have seen, you are all of those things and more." Catherine felt tears prick at her eyes, but they were good tears, tears of relief and hope. "You barely know me. We met 3 days ago." "I know enough," Jesse said. "I know you are brave enough to travel alone across the frontier. I know you are skilled enough to save lives and smart enough to track down the source of contamination. I know you are kind to children and patient with the elderly and willing to stand up to men twice your size when you know you are right. I know that when you smile, it feels like sunshine, and when you focus on your work, you are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. So no, maybe I do not know your favorite color or how you like your coffee, but I know the things that matter." Catherine was trembling, overwhelmed by the intensity of his words and her own response to them. "Yellow," she said. "My favorite color is yellow, and I like my coffee with cream and 1 sugar." Jesse smiled slowly. "Good to know." He reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair that had escaped her bun behind her ear. His hand lingered on her cheek, warm and calloused and impossibly gentle. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Catherine's answer was to lean forward and close the distance between them. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, a question and an answer all at once. Then Jesse's arms came around her, pulling her closer, and Catherine felt herself melting into him. It had been so long since she had allowed herself to feel like this, vulnerable and open and wanting. With Henry, kisses had been perfunctory, obligations fulfilled. This was entirely different. This was fire and need and a sense of rightness that she had never experienced before. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Jesse rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he whispered. "Please, Catherine, stay and heal this valley. Stay and let me court you properly. Stay and see if this thing between us is as real and as strong as I think it is." Catherine thought about all the reasons she should say no, about her plans for San Francisco, about the dangers of tying herself to a man and a place. But then she thought about Mrs. Patterson's grateful tears, about the Tucker twins' laughter, about the way Jesse looked at her like she was precious and powerful all at once. "Yes," she said, "I will stay." The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Catherine officially established her practice, renting a small building on Main Street that had previously been a barber shop. Jesse and several other men from town helped her clean it out and set it up with examining tables, shelves for her medicines, and a desk where she could keep patient records. Word spread quickly that Redemption Valley had a permanent healer, and people came from miles around seeking treatment. Catherine dealt with everything from broken bones to childbirth, from chronic pain to acute infections. She was busier than she had ever been in Philadelphia, and she loved every exhausting minute of it. Jesse courted her with patient determination. He brought her wildflowers picked from the meadows near his ranch. He fixed the leaky roof on her clinic without being asked. He showed up at the boarding house for supper several times a week, charming both Mary and Mrs. Patterson, who had made a full recovery and appointed herself Catherine's unofficial guardian. "That man is smitten with you," Mrs. Patterson said one evening after Jesse had left. "And unless I miss my guess, you are equally smitten with him." Catherine could not deny it. Somewhere between treating patients and solving the water contamination problem and learning about Jesse's dreams for his ranch, she had fallen completely in love. It terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. 2 months after her arrival in Redemption Valley, Jesse invited Catherine to join him for a picnic lunch at his favorite spot by the creek. The weather was perfect, warm but not hot, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of sage and juniper. They spread a blanket under a cottonwood tree and ate the lunch Frank had prepared. Afterward, Catherine lay back and looked up through the golden leaves at the impossibly blue sky. "I am happy," she said, surprised by the realization. "I do not think I have ever been truly happy before, content maybe, but not this." Jesse propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her. "I am glad. You deserve happiness, Catherine, so do you." "I have it," Jesse said simply. "Right here, right now, with you." Catherine reached up and traced the scar on his cheek, something she had been wanting to do for weeks. "How did you get this?" "Barbed wire during a roundup. Horse spooked, I was not paying attention, caught my face on a fence. Could have been much worse." "It suits you," Catherine said. "Makes you look dangerous," Jesse laughed. "Dangerous? Me? I am about as dangerous as a barn cat." "You have no idea how you look," Catherine said softly. "Especially when you are working with the horses or fixing something or talking about the land. You have this intensity, this focus." "It is quite attractive." Jesse's eyes darkened. "Is that so?" "That is so." He leaned down and kissed her, slow and deep, and Catherine felt heat bloom in her belly. They had kissed many times over the past weeks, but always in public or with others nearby. This was the first time they had been truly alone, and the awareness of that fact hung in the air between them. "Catherine," Jesse said, his voice rough, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Is this real for you? What we have, is it just convenience because we are both here and both lonely? Or is it something more?" Catherine sat up, needing to look him in the eye for this. "It is real, Jesse. It is the most real thing I have ever felt. I love you. I did not mean to, did not plan to, but I do. I love your kindness and your strength and your terrible jokes. I love the way you care about your neighbors and your animals and your land. I love that you see me as an equal, that you value my work and my opinions. I love you, and it terrifies me because I never wanted to need anyone this much." Jesse's face transformed with joy. "You do not need to be terrified. I love you too, Catherine. I think I have loved you since the moment you climbed down from that wagon and looked at me like you were ready to take on the whole damn world. You are the strongest, smartest, most magnificent woman I have ever met, and I want to spend the rest of my life loving you, if you will let me." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Inside was a simple gold ring with a small but perfectly clear diamond. "It is not fancy," Jesse said, suddenly nervous. "But it was my grandmother's, and my father sent it to me when I wrote to him about you. Catherine Moore, will you marry me? Will you let me be your partner and your equal? Will you build a life with me here in this valley we both love?" Catherine felt tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling so wide it hurt. "Yes, yes, Jesse, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. Then he was kissing her again, and they were laughing and crying at the same time, giddy with joy and relief and the sheer rightness of it all. They were married 6 weeks later in a ceremony conducted by Reverend Hamilton, who had made a full recovery and considered Catherine something of a personal hero. The entire town turned out for the wedding, which was held in the small church on the edge of town. Catherine wore a simple white dress that Mary had helped her sew, with yellow wildflowers in her hair. Jesse wore his best suit, looking handsome and slightly uncomfortable in the formal attire. When he saw Catherine walking down the aisle, however, his face lit up with such pure love that several people in the congregation openly wept. The vows they spoke were traditional, but when Jesse promised to honor and cherish her, to support her work and value her independence, Catherine knew he meant every word. And when she promised to love and respect him, to build a life together as true partners, she felt the weight and joy of that commitment settle into her bones. The reception was held at the café, with Senora Martinez and Frank combining their considerable talents to create a feast. There was music and dancing, and Catherine found herself swept from one partner to another, as nearly every man in town wanted to dance with the bride. But she always came back to Jesse, to the safety and rightness of his arms. Late in the evening, as the party was winding down, Mrs. Patterson pulled Catherine aside. "I want you to know something," the older woman said. "When you rode into town that day, I thought we were finished. I thought this valley was dying and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. But you saved us, not just from the poisoning but from despair. You gave us hope, and you gave Jesse something I have never seen him have before: joy. So thank you for staying, for choosing us, for being exactly who you are." Catherine hugged her, too moved to speak. Jesse and Catherine spent their wedding night at the ranch, in the house that was now theirs together. Jesse had spent weeks adding feminine touches, new curtains, a larger bed, shelves for Catherine's medical books. It was thoughtful and sweet, and Catherine loved him even more for it. Their lovemaking was tender and passionate, a revelation for Catherine, who had been taught that marital intimacy was something to be endured rather than enjoyed. With Jesse, it was entirely different. He was patient and attentive, learning what she liked, showing her pleasures she had never imagined. Afterward, lying in his arms, Catherine felt a completeness she had never known was possible. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Jesse asked, his hand stroking her hair. "For asking me to stay, for seeing me as I am, for loving me." Jesse pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Thank you for saying yes." The first year of their marriage was not without challenges. Catherine's practice continued to grow, sometimes demanding 18-hour days when there was an outbreak of influenza or a difficult childbirth. Jesse's ranch had its own demands: cattle to tend, fences to mend, seasonal roundups that took him away from home for days at a time. But they made it work. They learned each other's rhythms, figured out how to support one another's ambitions while building something together. Jesse never complained when Catherine was called away at odd hours, and Catherine never resented the time Jesse needed to devote to the ranch. They had chosen this life deliberately, and they were both determined to make it succeed. Catherine became an integral part of the community in ways that went beyond her medical practice. She started a women's health circle, teaching mothers about nutrition and hygiene and the warning signs of common childhood illnesses. She worked with Senora Martinez to create a small lending library, buying books with money from her practice and encouraging literacy among both children and adults. She even convinced the territorial government to send a visiting dentist twice a year, dramatically improving the oral health of the valley's residents. Jesse's ranch prospered as well. With Catherine's help managing the finances and Frank's cooking keeping the ranch hands fed and happy, Jesse was able to expand his herd and improve his grazing lands. He became known throughout the territory for raising quality beef cattle, and buyers came from as far as Denver to purchase his stock. 2 years after their wedding, Catherine discovered she was pregnant. The realization was both joyful and terrifying. She had attended dozens of births, had seen both the joy and the danger inherent in childbirth. The idea of experiencing it herself was daunting. Jesse was over the moon when she told him. "A baby," he kept repeating, as if he could not quite believe it. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you disappointed it is not a foal?" Catherine teased, and Jesse laughed. "A little human will do just fine," he said, pulling her into his arms. "Are you scared?" "Terrified," Catherine admitted. "I know all the things that can go wrong." "And you know all the things that can go right," Jesse reminded her. "You are strong and healthy, and you have helped bring dozens of healthy babies into this world. Our child could not ask for a better mother." Catherine leaned into his strength, letting his confidence bolster her own courage. The pregnancy was relatively easy, though Catherine had to cut back on some of the more physically demanding aspects of her practice. She trained Mary Patterson, who had shown an aptitude for healing work, to assist her, and together they managed to keep the clinic running smoothly. On a warm April evening in 1881, Catherine went into labor. Jesse was beside himself with worry, pacing the bedroom like a caged animal while Mary and Senora Martinez attended to Catherine. Frank had been banished to the barn to keep Jesse from driving everyone mad with his fretting. The labor was long and painful, lasting nearly 20 hours. Catherine drew on every bit of her medical knowledge and her own inner strength to get through it, and finally, as the sun was rising on a new day, their son was born. "A boy," Mary announced, placing the squalling infant on Catherine's chest. "A healthy, strong boy." Jesse was let in a few minutes later, his face pale with worry. But when he saw Catherine, exhausted but smiling, holding their son, he collapsed onto his knees beside the bed. "You did it," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "You were so brave, so strong." "We did it," Catherine corrected, taking his hand. "Meet your son." They named him Thomas after Jesse's father, and he was perfect in every way. Catherine, who had delivered so many babies and thought she understood maternal love, was unprepared for the overwhelming force of her feelings for this tiny person. She would have moved mountains, fought armies, done anything to protect him. Jesse was an excellent father, patient and gentle and utterly besotted with his son. Catherine loved watching them together, Jesse's large, calloused hands cradling Thomas with infinite care, his deep voice singing lullabies that were probably meant for cattle but worked just as well on babies. Catherine returned to work when Thomas was 2 months old, bringing him with her to the clinic and nursing him between patients. The women of Redemption Valley rallied around her, taking turns watching the baby when Catherine needed to focus on a difficult case, bringing meals, offering advice. Thomas thrived, growing into a curious, energetic toddler who kept both his parents on their toes. When he was 2, Catherine discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she was less frightened, more confident in her body's ability to bring a child into the world. Their daughter, Elizabeth, was born on a snowy December morning, arriving much faster than her brother and announcing her presence with lusty screams that could probably be heard in the next county. She had Catherine's dark hair and Jesse's green eyes, and she was stubborn and fierce from the start. "She is going to be trouble," Jesse said fondly, watching his daughter refuse to sleep in her cradle and demand to be held. "Just like her mother," Catherine replied with a grin. Over the next few years, their family settled into a rhythm. Catherine's practice remained busy but manageable, especially with Mary now fully trained as her assistant. Jesse's ranch continued to prosper, allowing him to hire additional hands and take on the role of foreman rather than doing all the work himself. This gave him more time at home with Catherine and the children, and he relished every moment. Thomas showed an early interest in animals, following his father around the ranch and asking endless questions about the cattle and horses. Elizabeth, true to her mother's legacy, was fascinated by Catherine's medical work and loved playing with the bandages and medicine bottles, though she was firmly told that the actual medications were not toys. When Thomas was 6 and Elizabeth was 4, Catherine and Jesse decided their family was complete. They had built something beautiful together, a thriving medical practice, a successful ranch, 2 healthy children, and a marriage based on mutual respect, genuine partnership, and deep love. One evening, after the children were asleep, Catherine and Jesse sat on their porch watching the sun set over the valley. It was a ritual they had maintained throughout their marriage, these quiet moments to reconnect and appreciate what they had built together. "You ever regret it?" Jesse asked, breaking a comfortable silence. "Staying here instead of going to San Francisco, marrying me instead of building your practice in a big city?" Catherine looked at him in surprise. "Where is this coming from?" Jesse shrugged, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "I was talking to a cattle buyer from San Francisco today. He was describing the city, all the opportunities there, the culture and sophistication. And I thought about you, how smart and talented you are, and I wondered if maybe you sometimes wish you had made a different choice." Catherine took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "Jesse Thornton, I have never, not for one single moment, regretted staying here. This valley is my home. These people are my people. You are my heart, and our children are my joy. I have built exactly the life I wanted, a life where I am valued for my skills, where I make a real difference, where I am truly loved for who I am. San Francisco could never give me that. You are sure?" "I am absolutely certain. You asked me to stay and heal this valley, and I did. But what I did not know then, what I could not have known, was that in staying and healing others, I would heal myself. I would find the place I belong, the person I was meant to be. So no, my love, I have zero regrets." Jesse pulled her close, and they sat wrapped in each other's arms as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges. A drought one year tested everyone's resources, but the community pulled together, sharing water and helping neighbors whose wells ran dry. Catherine and Jesse opened their home to a family whose ranch had failed, housing them until they could get back on their feet. A scarlet fever outbreak the following winter pushed Catherine to her limits, but she fought tirelessly for every patient, and her efforts paid off. While other towns in the territory lost dozens of children, Redemption Valley lost only one, a heartbreaking tragedy but far less devastating than it might have been. Through it all, Catherine and Jesse's love deepened and matured. They weathered disagreements and setbacks, celebrated triumphs and milestones. They learned each other's fears and dreams, supported one another through grief and joy. Thomas grew into a thoughtful young man who loved the land as much as his father did. At 16, he was already a skilled cattleman and was planning to take over the ranch someday. Elizabeth, at 14, was apprenticing with her mother, showing a natural talent for healing that sometimes surpassed Catherine's own abilities. "She is going to be brilliant," Catherine told Jesse one evening as they discussed their daughter's future. "Even better than I am." "She learned from the best," Jesse said, "but she has her own gifts too, her own way of connecting with patients." "I think she might end up doing things you never dreamed of," Catherine smiled. "I hope so. I want her to have every opportunity, every choice I had and more." On their 15th wedding anniversary, Jesse surprised Catherine with a trip to Santa Fe. It was the first time they had left the valley together since their honeymoon, and Catherine felt giddy as a teenager as they rode the train through spectacular scenery. In Santa Fe, they stayed in a real hotel with hot running water and electric lights, marvels that Catherine had read about but never experienced. They ate in restaurants, visited the cathedral, browsed the markets. It was magical and exotic, and Catherine loved every minute of it. But she also loved coming home, riding back into Redemption Valley and seeing the familiar landscape, being greeted by friends and neighbors, watching Thomas and Elizabeth run out to meet them. This was where she belonged, where her heart lived. That night back in their own bed, Jesse held her close. "Happy anniversary, Catherine. Thank you for 15 incredible years." "Thank you for asking me to stay," Catherine whispered. "For seeing what I could be, what we could be, before I saw it myself." "You would have figured it out eventually," Jesse said. "You are the smartest person I know." "Smart enough to say yes when you proposed," Catherine agreed. "That might be the smartest thing I ever did." As Catherine drifted off to sleep, safe in Jesse's arms, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. She had left Philadelphia seeking independence and ended up finding partnership. She had come west to prove she did not need anyone, and discovered that needing someone and being independent were not mutually exclusive. She had ridden into Redemption Valley planning to pass through, to sell some remedies and move on, and instead she had stayed to heal not just bodies but a whole community, and in the process had been healed herself. The years continued to unfold, each one bringing new joys and challenges. Thomas married a sweet girl named Anna from a neighboring ranch when he was 22, and they gave Catherine and Jesse their first grandchild, a boy named Jesse after his grandfather. Elizabeth went to study medicine in Denver for 2 years, coming home with official credentials and modern techniques that she combined with Catherine's herbal knowledge to create an even more effective practice. Catherine and Jesse grew older together, their hair turning gray, their bodies moving a bit slower. But their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger, deepened by decades of shared experience, of weathered storms and celebrated victories. On their 30th anniversary, the town of Redemption Valley threw a celebration in their honor. Nearly 300 people attended, including folks who had traveled from hundreds of miles away. Speaker after speaker stood up to talk about how Catherine had saved their life, or the life of someone they loved, how Jesse had helped them in times of trouble, how together the couple had made the valley a better place. Catherine was overwhelmed by the outpouring of love and gratitude. "I just did my job," she protested to Mrs. Patterson, who was now in her 70s but still running the boarding house with her daughter Mary and granddaughter. "You did far more than your job," Mrs. Patterson corrected. "You built a legacy. Look around at this town, at these people. So many of them are here because of you, because you stayed when you could have left, because you healed them or their children or their parents. You made a difference, Catherine. A real, lasting difference. That night, lying in bed beside Jesse, Catherine reflected on those words. She had made a difference. She had healed not just individual patients but an entire community. And in the process, she had built exactly the life she wanted, one of purpose and love, of contribution and partnership. "What are you thinking about?" Jesse asked, his voice sleepy. "About how lucky I am," Catherine said. "About how that dusty, desperate cowboy had the audacity to ask a stranger to stay and heal his whole valley. About how saying yes was the best decision I ever made." Jesse chuckled. "I was pretty desperate. But I saw something in you that day, something special. I knew if I let you ride out of town, I would regret it for the rest of my life. So you asked me to stay." "So I asked you to stay," Jesse agreed. "And you said yes." "I said yes," Catherine confirmed, her hand finding his in the darkness. "And I have been saying yes to you and to this life every day since." They fell asleep holding hands, as they had done for 30 years, and would continue to do for many more. Elizabeth eventually took over the medical practice entirely, allowing Catherine to retire and focus on teaching, writing down all her knowledge of herbal remedies and treatments for future generations. Thomas ran the ranch with skill and wisdom, expanding it into one of the most successful operations in the territory. Catherine and Jesse became the beloved grandparents to 6 grandchildren, all of whom adored them and begged for stories about the old days. Catherine would tell them about riding into Redemption Valley with nothing but a wagon full of herbs and a determination to make her own way. Jesse would tell them about seeing a strong, beautiful woman climb down from that wagon and knowing, somehow, that his life was about to change forever. When Catherine was 72 and Jesse was 75, they sat on their porch one final time together, watching the sunset paint the valley in shades of gold and crimson. Jesse had been sick for several months, and they both knew his time was short. "I do not want to leave you," he said, his voice weak but his hand still strong as it gripped hers. "I know," Catherine said, tears streaming down her face. "But you have fought hard enough, my love. If you need to go, you can go. I will be all right." "You have always been strong," Jesse said. "Strongest person I ever met." "You made me stronger," Catherine replied. "You and this life we built together." Jesse passed peacefully that night, Catherine holding his hand and whispering her love into his ear. The valley mourned the loss of one of its pillars, and the funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives Jesse had touched. Catherine lived for another 8 years, continuing to teach and write and love her grandchildren. She never remarried, never even considered it. Jesse had been her partner, her equal, her great love, and there would never be anyone else. She passed quietly in her sleep at the age of 80, her children and grandchildren surrounding her bed. Her last words were, "Tell Jesse I am coming home." Catherine Moore Thornton was buried beside her husband on a hill overlooking Redemption Valley. The headstone read, "She rode in to heal and stayed to love. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and healer. She made all the difference." And indeed she had. The medical practice she founded continued for generations, with Elizabeth, and then Elizabeth's daughter and granddaughter carrying on the tradition. The techniques and remedies Catherine documented became the foundation for improved health care throughout the territory. The ranch Jesse built remained in the family, a testament to hard work and honest living. But more than any professional legacy, Catherine and Jesse left behind something even more valuable, a love story that inspired everyone who knew them. They had shown that partnership and independence could coexist, that love could be both passionate and practical, that 2 people from different worlds could build something beautiful together. Decades later, when young people in Redemption Valley fell in love, their elders would smile and say, "Just like Catherine and Jesse." It became the standard by which all relationships were measured: genuine partnership, mutual respect, deep and abiding love. The valley that had been dying when Catherine rode in had not just survived but thrived. The poisoned water was long forgotten, replaced by a sophisticated system of wells and irrigation. The town had grown into a prosperous community with schools, churches, businesses, and culture. And at the heart of it all, woven into the very fabric of the place, was the legacy of a woman who had come to sell herbal remedies and stayed to heal not just bodies but an entire community. The cowboy who had asked her to stay had given her the greatest gift: a place to belong, a purpose to fulfill, and a love that lasted beyond death itself. And Catherine, in return, had given him and the valley everything she had: her skills, her dedication, her heart. It was, by any measure, a love story for the ages. And it all began with a dusty wagon rolling into a desperate town, a brave woman with jars of herbs and a head full of knowledge, and a cowboy who had the wisdom to recognize a miracle when he saw one and the courage to ask her to stay. In the end, that is what love is: the courage to ask and the wisdom to say yes. Catherine and Jesse had both in abundance, and they used it to build something that outlasted them both: a legacy of healing, of partnership, of a love that changed an entire valley and everyone in it. Their story became legend, passed down through generations, a reminder that sometimes the most important journeys are the ones we never plan to take, and sometimes home is not where we started, but where we choose to stay. Catherine had chosen Redemption Valley, and Redemption Valley had chosen her right back. And together, they had created something that would endure as long as the red rocks stood, and the creek flowed and people remembered what it meant to truly love and be loved in return.